The South Carolina Hall of Fame was founded in Myrtle Beach in 1973 to recognize and honor contemporary and past citizens who have made outstanding contributions to South Carolina's heritage, history, and progress.
Born into one of the wealthiest planter families in the South, Wade Hampton III would be remembered as one of the most revered leaders to come out of South Carolina, playing a significant role during the Civil War.
When the Civil War began, he was not eager for secession. He was not eager to see a war. He ended up becoming the most successful and the highest ranking general from South Carolina in the Confederate Army.
Hampton used the wealth that he and his family had amassed over the years to raise his own fighting regiment. Hampton's Legion played a critical role in some of the early battles of the war. Despite having no formal military training, Hampton distinguished himself in combat.
Hampton was one of the few officers who began the war with a high rank, who had no military experience and yet turned out to be an excellent commander. Hampton's first battle was First Manassas. That's his baptism of fire. He performed really well. In fact, he was one of the early heroes of the battle who held the Confederate line together before Stonewall Jackson arrived on the scene.
After healing from wounds sustained in the Battle of Seven Pines, Hampton returned to the war serving under General Jeb Stuart and was placed in command of a cavalry brigade. By 1864, Wade Hampton was the cavalry commander of the Army of Northern Virginia.
He was wounded twice more at Gettysburg and defeated the Union cavalry officer Sheridan at the Battle of Trevilian Station. In the beginning of 1865, at his own request, he was transferred to South Carolina to try to help defend his own state.
By the end of the bloody conflict, Hampton's fortune had been decimated and his plantation homes ravaged by Union troops. However, in the absence of his former wealth, his political popularity grew.
He is one of the first and one of the few white Southerners who are saying that white South Carolina owed something to blacks, and he also thought that if South Carolina did not enfranchise black voters, then the federal government would come in and do that.
In 1876, the Democratic Party in the state looked to Hampton to restore the South's tradition of white rule in South Carolina and convinced him to run for governor.
Hampton's campaign for governor in 1876 is known as the Red Shirt campaign because he had a lot of followers who all wore red shirts and committed a lot of violence and intimidation and fraud in the effort to get him elected. Hampton, both publicly and privately, opposed the use of violence. However, Hampton had no problem with what he called peaceful shows of force. When he rode into a town to give his speeches, he had hundreds of red shirts in column, in formation, armed, and he really thought that that would be such an impressive display, not only to whites to make them more enthusiastic about his campaign, but also that it would bring a lot of blacks over to his campaign.
After the much contested election between Hampton and the Republican incumbent Daniel Chamberlain, President Rutherford B. Hayes successfully settled the matter by withdrawing federal troops from South Carolina, paving the way for Hampton to take office and bringing an end to Reconstruction in the state. In spite of the violence used against blacks to ensure Hampton's victory, as governor, he supported their right to vote and even appointed some to public office, actions that put him at odds within his own party.
In Hampton's eyes, white South Carolinians and black South Carolinians had been living side by side for a long time. They had been through a lot together, and if they were going to prosper, they had to get along and work together.
Hampton served 2 terms as governor, after that in the United States Senate. By 1890, Ben Tillman was occupying the governor's office, and Hampton's policies of cooperation with blacks and Republicans didn't sit well with him. The following election, Tillman backed another candidate for Senate, and Hampton was forced to leave his seat in 1891. His political influence had come to an end. By the end of his life, Hampton was financially destitute and relied on the generosity of friends to support him. General Wade Hampton III died in Columbia in 1902. The people of South Carolina would never forget Hampton's legacy, his leadership in support of the Confederate cause, as well as his hope of redemption for his beloved and embattled Palmetto State.